Week 13 fantasy football, top 10 takeaways, instant reactions, latest breaking news, and all the injuries you need to know about right here on Fantasy Points. Let's get it.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
We are almost at the finish line here for the regular season. Week 13, nearly wrapped up here. Recording this on Sunday evening. Still have Monday Night Football to play. Still get Drake May on Monday night. Still get Jackson Dart on Monday night. But this was a wild week, and this is like the long week. This is the week that sort of breaks up the cadence of the regular season, and it's sort of the trigger point for us. Thanksgiving week, it's a lot of fun, and I think like for people that are civilians that are not participating in this thing of ours, they view Thanksgiving as like the start of the holiday season, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah. Then you get New Year's, and that's all she wrote. That's the holiday season. But for fantasy managers, Thanksgiving week is the end game. This is the start of the end game. It's nearly the end of the regular season, and it signals the start of the fantasy football playoffs. And maybe you're in a league where your fantasy playoffs is counting stats. Maybe you're in a traditional one loss and you're out fantasy football playoff. But Thanksgiving, it's sort of this is the beginning of the end. You also get kind of thrown off on Thanksgiving week because it's a busy week. Maybe you're traveling, a lot of family stuff. And then there's 3 games on Thanksgiving Day. And they were all lit this year. All of these games were over environments. All of these games had fantasy football implications. Then you get the Black Friday game, which was also an incredible game, especially if you're a Chicago Bears fan. Not so good if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. A lot going on this week. And this week, I think we got to start off at the top. Let's talk about some Rashee Rice. And Rashee Rice, this was a player that we've talked about here a number of times because ever since Rashee Rice has come back, Rashee Rice has been exactly what people wanted to see from him. The game did not go well for Kansas City. Bottom line, Kansas City loses another close game. You had the big win over Indianapolis last week. This week they go down in Dallas on Thanksgiving Day, 31-28 game. Patrick Mahomes was fantastic, but Rashee Rice is the story of the day. 8 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdown scores. 2 touchdown scores for Rashee Rice. Just like when he started in week 7, 2 touchdown scores his first game, and now 2 touchdown scores his 6th game. Scores a season-high 29.4 points. I mean, it's getting real for Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is looking like a league winner at the wide receiver position. Certainly you got Jackson Smith and Jigba. Certainly you got Jamar Chase. But Rashee Rice is very much in the mix. 24 points scored in week 12. And now 29.4 points scored in week 13. Putting up ridiculously good numbers. And you dive into it. You go on Fantasy Points data. And you dive into things here. 37.5% target share for Rashee Rice. That's elite. Absolutely elite this past week. 37.5% target share against Dallas. They were going to Rashee Rice early and often, force-feeding him the football. And that's been a trend for Rashee Rice, up to a 25.9% target share on the year. And let's dive into it a little bit more. What makes him special? What makes Rashee Rice so effective for fantasy football? Let's talk about the design targets. And you go to Fantasy Points data, design targets, it's basically screen passes. You can go and read Ryan Heath's work. Some of the Fantasy Points data charters have broken this down. It's not quite just screen passes, but it's mostly screen passes. 4th in design targets for Rashee Rice. And that's total. That's not like some like average. Total design targets despite playing in only 6 games. So he's only played in a small amount of games, but they're designing looks for him. So Rashee Rice is getting force-fed all these design targets. Then what is Rashee Rice doing when he has the football in his hand? Rashee Rice is now 11th in the NFL in yards after the catch. So he's killing it with yak. Again, only played 6 games, and he's 11th in the NFL in yak. Then you get to the points per game, 21.8 points per game, trailing only Jackson, Smith, and Jigba among all wide receivers. So Rashee Rice is killing it with the points per game. His role is completely locked in. And this is a Kansas City team that's not shutting people down. They are getting challenged every single week, and they will continue to do so. There's no reason to think that Rashee Rice is going to slow down at any point. Houston next week is a tricky matchup. Chargers in week 15, that can be a tricky matchup. But then when we get to like the nitty-gritty, week 16 at Tennessee, potential blow-up smash week, and then you get Rashee Rice. This is the tricky one. Week 17, the Denver Broncos, and it's in Kansas City. And you say, what was the worst game for Rashee Rice this season? It was Denver in week 11. Scored 9.8 fantasy points. He did have 9 targets. Revenge week. It's like, put up comes to shut up kind of deal for Rashee Rice. Like, can Rashee Rice put up a smash week against Denver? Absolutely. Will that game be a close one? Probably. All these Kansas City games are coming down to the wire. So Rashee Rice, a massive edge. If you took him in the 6th round this year when he was falling with the suspension, you were able to sort of overcome things. You have an edge pick, an edge player heading into your fantasy football playoffs. And let's keep it going. We talked about Thanksgiving with Rashee Rice. Let's talk about Friday. Let's talk about Black Friday. And the Black Friday game is awesome. I think it's awesome that they're doing this each year. I know some people, when this came out, there's purists who were like, the NFL's taking away from family time. I mean, forget that. I mean, the family time's nice, but we eat Thanksgiving dinner together. I don't think families necessarily are hanging out on Black Friday. Maybe your family is. I know my family, we do stuff, but I got little kids. I think for most people, being able to watch an NFL game when there's no work, incredible. And you had a very good game this year. You have Chicago Bears with Ben Johnson leading the NFC North, heading into Philadelphia, last year's Super Bowl champion and NFC East leader, Philadelphia Eagles. And Chicago walks out of there with a road statement win. Just an awesome game for Chicago. Chicago defense stepping up to the plate and shutting down Philly. Completely shut down Saquon Barkley. A.J. Brown was the main storyline. A.J. Brown has a 10-catch, 132-yard game, 2 touchdowns. But the story of the day was the dual-headed running back committee in Chicago. I should say not necessarily a committee. I should say it's a dual-headed backfield. And you think about Ben Johnson, his best teams in Detroit, 2 running backs that are putting up fantasy numbers. You go back to his first year in Detroit. It was DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams. Both of those players finished as RB2s on the year. Both of those players were in our fantasy lineups. Then the following 2 years, where it was just Ben Johnson scoring at will, it was David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, you're starting to see it. And it's not what we thought. This was the backfield where, for like weeks and weeks heading in the NFL draft, where like Chicago's getting a Ashton Genty in the first, or if not, they'll get Judkins in the second, or they'll get Caleb Johnson in the second. They'll get somebody. But they end up with Kyle Monangai, 7th-round pick out of Rutgers, who there was a Kyle Monangai hive. There was people that liked Monangai, but again, 7th-round pick. And DeAndre Swift, who sort of just survived the offseason. I know I do a lot of Dynasty content. If you enjoy Fantasy Football Daily, make sure you're subscribed to Dynasty Life. I talked about DeAndre Swift on Dynasty Life as a player that might get, nuked during the NFL draft. It's been anything but. DeAndre Swift last week had a poor scoring output, and it looked like Kyle Monangai was going to maybe take over, but it was anything but that. DeAndre Swift was really, really good against Philly, sort of a revenge game for him against his former team. 18 carries, 125 yards, and a touchdown. Also catches a pass for 13 yards. But the story was Kyle Monangai. Monangai is heating up. 22 carries, 130 yards, and a touchdown. We saw last week Monangai outscore DeAndre Swift. I think this is where we're heading with Chicago. Chicago's winning a bunch of games here. And now you have Chicago beating Philly on the road. This is a statement win. This is a program win. This is a we can win in Philly. We can beat anybody sort of argument. And now they get the Green Bay Packers. And this is going to be telling. Chicago gets Green Bay in 2 out of their next 3 games. So you've got Chicago going into Green Bay. Very, very tough game in Week 14 here. Week 15 in Chicago, Cleveland Browns. You got to think Chicago's going to roll them there. And then week 16, Green Bay again. So this is a very strange schedule quirk. But Green Bay, very, very good against the run. And Green Bay shows up twice for Chicago. Then week 17, you have Chicago on the road in San Francisco. So a tricky schedule here for the Chicago Bears. But it's difficult to kind of fade these Bears. The Bears are embracing the youth movement, embracing the two-headed backfield. And this was telling. Philadelphia allowed 281 rushing yards to Chicago. Before this week, before week 13, their season high in yards allowed was 172. This is now 2 straight losses for the Eagles. We're going to keep an eye on this one. Philly loses to Dallas. Philly loses to Chicago. And now Philly gets a tricky road game next week on the West Coast in LA. Sort of a must-win for the Eagles to sort of right the ship here. We all saw everything working out for Philly in 2024. This felt a little bit like 2023 Philadelphia, where Philadelphia, like sort of down the stretch, things started to unravel. Hope that's not the case. But LA next week, that's one we're going to keep an eye on. Talking about backfields here, we like this was supposed to be the week that we got everybody back. And instead, we got one guy back. So Bucky Irving plays. And Bucky Irving had 17 carries, 61 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Also had 2 catches for 20 yards. Had another touchdown where there was a holding, sort of an unnecessary holding. So Bucky should have had 2 touchdowns in his return game. Really, really promising stuff. Pour one out for my guy Sean Tucker. Looks over for Sean Tucker. He had 2 carries, 0 fantasy points. Rachaad White mixed in, 5 touches. But this is Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving is back. And Bucky Irving, listen, I talked about Bucky Irving like in a negative sense on a couple shows because I'm very worried about the situation where the guy wasn't coming back. But let's take a step back. Bucky Irving hasn't scored fewer than 13.9 points in any week this season. 16 points this week in week 13. Now we look at the schedule for Tampa Bay. New Orleans in week 14. Atlanta in week 15. And then 2 games that are going to be tricky. Week 16 at Carolina. Carolina's playing out of their mind. Huge win for Carolina this week against the LA Rams. And then week 17 in Miami. The all-Florida game. Bucky Irving against Devon Achane. Sign me up for that one. That feels like a game that could tilt over, and we know the weather's going to be good in Florida that time of year. But Bucky Irving's back. But the 2 players who are not back, Omarion Hampton and Trey Benson. We were supposed to get these guys back. It feels like these weird prolonged absences, like we're not getting our guys back. And I'm worried a little bit about this one because LA has offensive line issues now. We're going to talk about Justin Herbert, the injury later, but we're not potentially going to have like a leap of faith start. And I hate to see this. So here's a nightmare scenario for you. Let's say Trey Benson misses week 14. Let's say Omarion Hampton misses week 14. Let's say you make the fantasy playoffs with those 2 guys. And let's say that they come back in week 15. Are you going to start them? And that's like where Bucky Irving, now we saw what happened. Where Bucky Irving was on a bunch of benches this week. I started him in like 2 spots, but not because it was like, oh, I know Bucky Irving's going to ball out. It was because my options weren't great. So I used Bucky Irving in 2 spots. And we got 16 points. One with Dan Williamson, that was an NFFC team, and another on an FFPC Dynasty team. I used him big spot. Bucky Irving delivers for me. I had him on a couple benches, though, because I was a little nervous about this one. But I get a chance to see the ramp up. With Omarion Hampton and with Trey Benson, it's a leap of faith. You're going to put them in your lineup saying this is the week, but you don't get a chance to actually see them do it. That I worry about. And not getting a chance to see a player in a ramp-up environment, getting a chance to actually see it, and then you sort of have to throw them in your lineup in the fantasy playoffs, it can be done, but it takes a little bit more of a leap of faith. It gives you sort of an uncomfortable feeling. So really hoping those guys come back this week. Really hoping we see Omarion Hampton and Trey Benson this week in week 14. Because we don't want to see them make their debut in week 15. That would be about as tilting as it gets for fantasy managers that have them in the fantasy playoffs right around the corner. And we talked about Carolina. Let's talk about the team that they beat. And let's talk about the LA Rams. And let's talk about history here. Davante Adams, absolutely chasing history now. Davante Adams is just having an exceptional season. What we're seeing out of Davante Adams at his age is absolutely remarkable. Adams ends up with 4 catches for 58 yards and 5 targets, but he catches 2 touchdown passes again. So Davante keeps doing this, where Davante Adams keeps getting these not great yardage totals, but he's this ridiculously effective player around the goal line, and he's scoring touchdowns seemingly at will. 3 touchdowns in week 7, 2 touchdowns in week 9, a touchdown in week 10, a touchdown in week 11, 2 touchdowns in week 12, and now 2 touchdowns in week 13 against Carolina. Davante Adams is giving you wide receiver 1 value and then some, and he's now chasing history. Davante Adams now has 14 touchdown catches on the season. This gives him 7 seasons with 10 plus touchdown catches or more, which is already ridiculous. It gets even more ridiculous when you factor in that he turns 33 years old on Christmas Eve. Like, 33 years old this month in less than 20, at the time I'm recording this, in like 20-something days. Adams needs 5 touchdown catches to set a career high in touchdown catches on the year. Anybody want to bet against Davante Adams getting 5 more touchdown catches this season? I don't. The Rams offense now coming off a revenge week, they're looking to sort of target Davante Adams whenever they get in this sort of red zone, green zone situation around the goal line. And here's where it gets really interesting. Needs 5 touchdown catches to set a career high. His previous high was 18 in 2020. And he needs 6 touchdown catches to become the 3rd player in NFL history with 20 or more catches in a season. The other 2 guys with 20 catches or 20 touchdown catches or more in a season, not bad company. You might have heard of these guys. Jerry Rice, Randy Moss. And it's going to end up being Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Davante Adams if he has 6 more touchdown catches this year. Just incredible stuff from Davante Adams. Matt Stafford, through the touchdown, like the interception-less streak, ends for Matthew Stafford. Stafford has just been on this unbelievable run. Not his day today against Carolina. The ball was certainly not bouncing his way. Stafford's just been great in terms of the touchdown passes this season. But again, today he had 2 interceptions. And what's wild is we haven't seen an interception from Stafford since week 3 on the road in Philly. And if everybody remembers that game, that was like Philadelphia had that big comeback to beat LA in Philly. But LA is still in great shape for the playoffs, looking like a team that can be the number 1 seed in the NFC. They have Arizona in week 14, a hobbled Detroit team in week 15, and then the really tilting one on the road in week 16 against Seattle, and then a game where they should win against the now kind of hapless Atlanta Falcons in week 17. Keep an eye on this LA Rams team. They'll bounce back, but it's Davante Adams. That's the story. Let's talk about the team they played in Carolina. An absolute potential mess at the running back situation, at the running back position. This situation is tilting. Anybody who's watched my shows, listened to my podcasts, Fantasy Football Daily, School of Scott with Scott Barrett and I, and then A Dynasty Life, I've talked about Rico Dowdle all year. Rico Dowdle has been just a breath of fresh air for fantasy managers. But for the first time since week 2, we've seen now double-digit scoring for Chuba Hubbard this week. Absolutely tilting for Rico Dowdle managers. First half touches. Rico Dowdle had 7 touches for 28 yards. And Chuba Hubbard had 9 touches. And here's where it gets interesting. Had 37 rushing yards, but he had 2 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown as a receiver. Chuba Hubbard outsnapped Rico Dowdle 70-35 in the first half. Second half, it evened out a little bit. Hubbard ended up with 20 touches. Dowdle ended up with 19 touches. But we go from having like the bell cow Rico Dowdle to having this awful split. I'm worried about this one. Carolina's winning games. Carolina's a winning team. Dave Canales can't miss. This guy can coach, but he's got 2 running backs. And Dave Canales constantly told us how he liked both of these running backs. Constantly told us he liked both these running backs. When they made the decision to go from Chuba Hubbard to go to Rico Dowdle, and I gotta say, I think Chuba Hubbard's gotten healthier. I think they're ramping him up, and I think we're in a position where both these guys are on the flex line, and our like goal of having Rico Dowdle as our low end RB1. I think that ship has sailed. I hope I'm wrong. I got my bags packed with Rico Dowdle, but this is not what you want to see. You don't want to see split backfield usage, especially in a game where they win against the best team in the NFC in LA. This is one of the best wins in the Dave Canales era. Maybe the best win in the Dave Canales era. Carolina is fighting for a playoff berth, and I think they like both these running backs. Good if you're a Carolina Panthers fan. Bad if you're a fantasy football manager like myself with Rico Dowdle. We need to adjust here. If you have Chuba Hubbard, he's back on the flex line. He's back into the spot start RB2 line. Rico Dowdle, you got to adjust him down. We'll talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Another tilting one where George Pickens had outscored CeeDee Lamb in 3 out of the 5 games since CeeDee Lamb had come back. And we saw that big scoring outburst from George Pickens where he had 2 29-point weeks recently. And this was one where, like, Pickens would look like the league winner, but we always knew that CeeDee Lamb was an alpha, and we knew that the big game was coming from him. We heard Schottenheimer talk about CeeDee Lamb's going to get the ball, CeeDee Lamb's going to get the ball. So George Pickens scores 29 points, week 11, week 12. Pickens has nearly 17 points against Kansas City. Again, Dallas wins. Pickens has 13 targets, 6 catches for 88 yards. Really, really strong output for him. But the story on Thanksgiving was the CeeDee Lamb bounce back. CeeDee Lamb had 24 points, which is a season high for him in fantasy scoring. 7 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown. Gets 9 targets. So again, Dallas with 22 combined targets for these two players. They're completely locked in. This is one of the best wide receiver combinations in the league, if not the best, probably the best at this point. CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. But this Dallas team has some juice right now. Dallas gets the big win against Philly in week 13. They get the big win against Kansas City in week 13. So they beat the 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl last year in back-to-back weeks. Dallas has a lot of momentum here. Ever since they get Quentin Williams in that trade from the Jets, the defense has sort of turned around. Now they have a huge opportunity. Week 14 in Detroit, then week 15 against Minnesota, and week 16 against the Chargers. 3 more games against teams that were playoff teams last year. I think they might sweep these 3 games. I think Dallas might go in and win 3 games in a row and keep this thing going. They are completely locked in. We also had a big game from Javonte Williams, which was really, really nice to see. Dallas offense, it's easy to trust these guys, but a huge, huge bounce back week for CeeDee Lamb in the win. Got to talk about the Jameson Williams experience. So next week we get Dallas against Detroit. And now Detroit loses on Thanksgiving Day. Detroit plays Green Bay. Green Bay was just terrific. Christian Watson, big touchdown grab. Dontavian Wicks, really good stuff. Jordan Love was lights out. But the story was Jameson Williams and the Jameson Williams experience here. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes down with a sprained ankle injury. Now, they're saying this is the lower kind of sprained ankle, not a high sprain, so we can deal with that. It's going to be a week or 2. We know that the Sun God is tough as nails. You know he's going to come back soon. Figure he's going to miss in week 14, but figure you're going to see him in the fantasy football playoffs. I'm hoping week 15. But the story is Jameson Williams, 26.9 points on Thanksgiving. Hopefully you still started him. And you've got to sort of roll with the punches with JMO. No Laporta, no Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jameson Williams could have a season high in targets against Dallas, or he could fall flat on his face. Because with Jameson Williams, we now have the last 7 games. He has 5 games with 16 points scored or more. That's like wide receiver 1 kind of category. And then he's got 2 games with 0 points scored. So 2 with 0 and 5 with 16 or more. That's about as tilting as it gets. Detroit really, really needs a win against Dallas this week. It's going to be in Detroit. That game is going to be lit. But Jameson Williams has a chance to have a season high in targets with, again, Laporta probably done for the year. Amon-Ra St. Brown set to miss a week or two with an ankle injury. Keeping an eye on Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore loses on Thanksgiving, and the Lamar Jackson edge is gone right now. The Lamar Jackson edge in fantasy football is gone right now. And there was a lot of Lamar Jackson fantasy managers who were circling this game, saying everything's going to get right with Lamar Jackson because he's got 2 games against the Cincinnati Bengals. And everything's going to get right with Lamar Jackson. We're going to be okay because Lamar Jackson has the Cincinnati Bengals in 2 games. The end of the year, Lamar Jackson's schedule is looking good. But it's almost to the point where you can't trust him in fantasy. You just can't trust the guy in fantasy. Week 9 against Miami, 4 touchdown passes. That was his first game back from injury. Looked fantastic. Then you get to the last 4 weeks. 4 straight games without a QB1 finish. And 1 touchdown pass to 3 interceptions. Had another pick against Cincinnati. The last 3 games have been horrific. You're getting no rushing production whatsoever out of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has 0 rushing touchdowns this season since week 1. Absolutely unheard of. He's outside of the top 6 in rushing yards per game at the quarterback position after leading the position in rushing yards seemingly every year or finishing second. This is about as tilting as it gets when it comes to Lamar Jackson. But the quarterback opposite him, a lot of positives here. Joe Burrow was supposed to be done for the year. Joe Burrow has this ridiculous comeback here. We get Joe Burrow like being ramped up. We have Thanksgiving circled. There were still people who were pessimistic about this situation. But I got to say, the Cincinnati Bengals are still a live dog here. When you look at the AFC North is still very much alive when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow. I mean, they're rejuvenated here. And Burrow looked good. For a player that wasn't supposed to be playing, his season was supposed to be over. The Bengals improved to 4-8. They win on the road in Baltimore. And 4-8 should usually have you dead in the water. But the Ravens are now 6-6. The Steelers are 6-6. Steelers lose this week to Buffalo. The Ravens lose again to Cincinnati. And now the Bengals, taking a look at their schedule. So Joe Burrow has 261 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He targeted Jamar Chase 14 times, targeted Chase Brown 7 times. Exactly what you want to see if you're a Chase Brown or Jamar Chase fantasy manager. Both those guys are locked in. And he'll get T. Higgins back from concussion shortly. Cincinnati plays Buffalo next week. So that's a tricky one when it comes to Joe Burrow on the road in Buffalo, certainly capable of winning that one. Buffalo completely steamrolled Pittsburgh this week. That's a tough one. So the Cincinnati Bengals are going to get Buffalo this week. And then after that, the schedule's going to ease up a little bit. Start looking at Joe Burrow for the fantasy football playoffs. Baltimore in Cincy. They get him again, and Burrow could put up a number in that one. Then on the road in Miami, could put up a number in that one. And then week 17 against Arizona, another potential smash week. Joe Burrow's a locked-in QB1 in the fantasy playoffs. If you draft from the beginning of the year and you survived, you're back in it. You're back in it with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow officially back. Talking about the Arizona Cardinals, we mentioned they're going to play Cincinnati in week 17. Let's talk about the usage here with Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. About as tilting as it gets. Michael Wilson had 33 targets in weeks 12 and week 11. This week, Marvin Harrison Jr. comes back. Marvin Harrison Jr. ends up with 6 catches for 69 yards on 7 targets. Michael Wilson, 3 catches for 36 yards on 7 targets. Wilson ends up running more routes and having more snaps because Marvin Harrison Jr. suffered a heel injury in the 4th quarter. Left the game, didn't come back. So this might be back to being Michael Wilson's season in week 14. depending on the severity of Marvin Harrison Jr., but a huge letdown for Michael Wilson managers. There was some optimism that his strong play, the guy finished as wide receiver 1 overall and wide receiver 9 overall in consecutive weeks, 33 targets in consecutive weeks combined. There was some hope that he sort of had just earned this role, but at the very least, this is like a bad split. But if Harrison Jr. is out next week, Wilson is back in our starting lineups. And if Harrison Jr., this turns out to be nothing, then we really need to adjust things on Michael Wilson. It was an incredible run with Michael Wilson. He's not dead in the water by any means if Harrison Jr. is back, but he's more of like a wide receiver, low-end wide receiver 3 slash flex kind of play than a guy that we can start. But if Harrison Jr. is out, you can go back to treating Michael Wilson like a wide receiver 2 in week 14. So this will be a tilting one to keep an eye on. Good to see Marvin Harrison Jr. back, but again, hurts his heel. Really snake-bitten end of the year. Let's talk about Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, this is a great bounce-back week from him. It's been a frustrating season for Brock Bowers managers, a frustrating season for Las Vegas Raiders, NFL fans. But right now, Brock Bowers is the tight end 1, and Trey McBride had a huge game as well. So we'll talk about the Cardinals. McBride back to putting up another smash week. Had 17 points last week. Now he has 22 points. 8 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown for McBride. But Brock Bowers, it looks like he's going to be the tight end 1 on the week. Bowers was awesome. 4 catches for 63 yards. Only 4 targets, which was awful. Like, what are we doing here, Greg Olsen? It's your first game with Brock Bowers. Let's target him a little bit more. But again, Vegas gets steamrolled 31-14. But Bowers has 2 touchdown catches, and one of them might have been the catch of the year in the NFL. If you didn't see Brock Bowers' one-handed catch, it's one of the best one-handed catches you've ever seen in the sport of football. It was sort of hard to explain. He's going to the ground. It looked like it should have been thrown at his feet, and he somehow comes up with the ball. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. Maybe this is the start of Brock Bowers being completely ramped up for the rest of the year, but we do want to see more than 4 targets to this superstar Brock Bowers, who is suffering like us fantasy managers are with this Las Vegas Raiders team. Pete Carroll might have lost his fastball. I know that they fired Chip Kelly, but this is also a Pete Carroll situation. These Raiders are an absolute mess, but Brock Bowers is an absolute stud. A reminder to everyone that Brock Bowers is him. This is still a player you want to draft for 2026. Things will get better for Brock Bowers. He's an absolute superstar at the tight end position, but a very, very frustrating season for him. But at least you get this big week if you use him in DFS, or if you still are keeping him in your lineup, you get a big, big outcome. And the big injury we got to talk about, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's been having a terrific year, but Justin Herbert breaks a bone in his left hand. The latest is he's going to have surgery on Monday. So again, this is non-throwing hand. He's going to get surgery on Monday. And Justin Herbert, this one is tilting. Justin Herbert and the Chargers, they win the game, but potentially lose their franchise quarterback. Again, it's the left hand. He's going to get surgery on the left hand, so it's his non-throwing hand. Maybe he bounces back, but Trey Lance needs to be added in all formats. Trey Lance, especially in Superflex, could end up being an edge pick. Lance looked really, really good in the preseason. Again, anybody who's had the Trey Lance experience in fantasy knows exceptional mobility at the quarterback spot. LA's got some weapons here. Imagine there would be some design runs for Trey Lance if he is behind center. LA plays Philly this week, potentially without Justin Herbert. One we're going to keep an eye on. There'll be more talk about the waiver wire. I'm going to record my waiver wire show with Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley. Start sit with Graham Barfield. And then I drop another show with a guest this week as well. Fantasy Football Daily, make sure you subscribe to it anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe to the podcast feed. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We just crossed 23,000 YouTube subscribers for a reason. We're putting out videos that can help you win in fantasy football. Also, make sure you're subscribed to Dynasty Life, my Dynasty podcast, and School of Scott that I record with Scott Barrett every single week. One more week of the regular season. We've been crushing it this year at Fantasy Points, and we're going to continue to do so in the fantasy playoffs. Let's crush it in Week 14, and let's crush our fantasy playoffs as well. We've got you covered at Fantasy Points. I'm Theo Gremminger. We'll see you soon.